Hello and welcome to Representative Gary Glenn Reports. With Representative Gary Glenn, I'm John Perry. Representative, welcome.
John, good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Hope you had a good 4th of July.
I did. Hope you did too. We can talk about some of your activities in the district today. There is a lot to talk about, roads, but maybe we should start off with energy. Energy is a topic that you and I have talked about at length here. The first half of 2015, you're the vice chair of the House Energy Committee. And the fact of the matter is, in this current session of the Michigan House, it is one of the most dynamic and maybe one of the most important issues out there.
Well, we've had other hot issues that have come before us so far during this year, but this one's yet to come, and it's coming. You've had a proposal by the governor, you've had a proposal by the chairman of the House Energy Committee, on which I sit, and now we have a new proposal by the Senate Energy Committee chairman. And honestly, I have some pretty significant concerns, and a lot of people that I represent, like Dow Chemical and Midland Cogeneration Venture, have serious concerns about some of the common elements in all of these plans that have been put forth so far. For example, the House Energy Committee's plans so far would openly eliminate anybody's ability to choose an alternative supplier for their electricity other than the two big monopoly utilities, Consumers and Detroit Edison. The governor's proposal and the Senate proposal kind of do the same thing through the back door. They say you can continue to have choice in your electricity provider, but whoever you're buying electricity from has to be able to show 5 years that they can prove they can provide capacity. Both of the utilities in their reports to their stockholders are boasting that that will kill the choice market. And this is a complex issue, John, so for somebody who doesn't know what we're talking about, let me put it in terms that I think most people can understand. It took me a long time of studying it, but these are in the simple terms. For example, the Bay City schools in the district that I represent buy their electricity from an alternative energy supplier. They don't buy it from Consumers Energy, and they save $200,000 a year. Saginaw Valley State buys their electricity from Wolverine Power, not from Consumers Energy, and they save $200,000 a year. Now, Delta College or anybody in Midland, the Midland Public Schools or the City of Midland, they can't access those savings because by law they're prohibited from doing so because of an arbitrary 10% cap put on in 2008, an arbitrary 10% cap put on the number of consumers of energy who can buy their electricity from somebody other than Detroit Edison or in the district that I represent, Consumers Energy. So we're talking about, if you eliminate the choice market, taking away the savings that public schools enjoy, that significant commercial and industrial users enjoy, and all this, and our electricity rates are a major factor in Michigan's ability to retain manufacturing and jobs, and it's also a major element in our ability to attract new jobs. Andrew Liveris gave a speech a couple of months ago that I've mentioned to you before. He said we're going to continue to have operations in Midland for Dow Chemical because it's part of our heritage and we're proud of it. But if you want to know why Midland is not getting some of the facilities we're putting in Houston, give us more competitive energy rates and you'll get them. So this is a major economic development factor for us in mid-Michigan, and it's a matter of taking away savings. For example, 200,000 savings for Bay City schools, but the way the Clarkston School District put it to us in testimony before the Energy Committee was they said they save $350,000 a year. If you take away our ability to choose to buy electricity from a cheaper alternative provider, and you take away that savings, then we're forced to lay off 5 teachers. We subsequently found out that about half the public school districts in the state are in the choice market, but the Senate, the House, and the gubernatorial proposals for energy reform are to eliminate electricity choice. As vice chairman of the Energy Committee, I'm going to fill the vacuum for the want of a free market, competition, and consumer choice-based energy reform package. And just in the last a month ago we had a meeting of about 24 people who are interested in this choice issue. Just last night we had another meeting of maybe 2.5 so it's a growing group, and it represents Dow Chemical, Dow Corning, Midland Cogeneration Venture, the people who represent the school districts who are already in choice, and school districts like in Midland County who'd like to get into choice. And we're putting together a comprehensive free market, consumer choice and competition, competitive bidding based energy reform package. So we're going to try to compete. It should not be anything of any great significance that in a Republican-controlled legislature somebody would introduce free market principles to address any issue, but apparently it's of some note that we're going to get this done, and so that's going to be a major issue coming up as soon as we come back into session on a weekly basis in September.
And I would think, Representative, if you were to extrapolate the numbers you were just talking about across the state, there would have to be broad-based support for the ideas that you're talking about.
I don't think there's any question about it. It's just like I told Representative Ned Canfield from the Thumb area. I discussed this issue with him briefly, and I said, just call your local school superintendents. Find out, are any of them in the choice market? Would any of them like to be? And the following week, Ned came back and he said on the floor to me, 1.2 million. I said, what's that? He said, that's how much the school districts in the district I represent save from being able to buy from an alternative electricity supplier. And I said, Ned, that's only half the story, because there are school districts, most likely, who didn't get in under the 10% cap, and what would they save? So yes, there's going to be broad support. I think just about every legislator has at least one school district that has access to the choice market and is saving money and would be forced to cut spending, lay off teachers, have bigger class sizes if choice was taken away. And we have a coalition of people who are interested not only from a business standpoint, but from saving tax money. The flagship element, and the reason we're going to wait until September to introduce it, is we're going to wait until college and K through 12 classes are resuming and going back to schools on everybody's mind. And that's when we're going to introduce the package, the leading element of which will be to say that all school districts, all colleges and universities in Michigan are going to be free to choose, have equal access to savings through electrical choice in terms of choosing an alternative provider to either DTE or consumers. The Detroit public school system, according to one document with the Public Service Commission, would save $2 million a year. Kalamazoo saves $1 million a year. So I think those kind of savings for taxpayers, our proposal is going to cover K through 12 schools. It's going to cover all colleges and universities. SVSU saves, Delta can't, Northwood can't, for example, in my district. We're going to cover the state and all of its political subdivisions. So all state buildings, prisons alone would save $3 million a year for Michigan taxpayers. But not just state agencies, but counties, cities, townships, villages, so that we're saving taxpayers money at the local level. We're also going to address hospitals. Even though those are private entities, state taxpayers spend hundreds of millions of dollars paying medical bills through Medicaid. So that would also save taxpayers money. Beaumont Hospitals estimates they'd save $3 million a year alone, just that one hospital. So if we can bring down the cost of health care through electrical choice, that's going to be a savings. And then we're going to look at providing choice to residential and other electricity consumers so that if they, for example, buy from a solar array or from a windmill farm, a renewable source of energy, that's not in under the cap at all. So it encourages the use of renewable clean energies, not by mandates, but by incentives. If you can buy everything you need from a solar power, you can have without limit, you can get it from an alternative provider. And the same thing for anybody at their home or their business who would install some type of mechanism that would reduce their energy consumption. So an energy optimization, if that wouldn't count against the 10% cap. So we're going to take a free market approach to this issue with the point initially of saving taxpayers money, but with the eventual objective of giving everybody in the state the freedom to choose. We can't get there all in one swoop, but to allow anybody to continue to have the freedom to purchase electricity from an alternative provider, that's going to be the minimal victory we have, and hopefully to expand it. Because right now, all of the proposals, the governor's, the Senate's, and the existing House proposal would eliminate anybody's ability to choose to buy electricity from an alternative provider. So that's, as you know from our discussions, that's been the focal point of a lot of my efforts. For the first 6 months as a legislator, it was a complex issue, had to do a lot of studying just to understand the complexity of it. But for the folks that I represent, it really is as simple as knowing that in every other aspect of our life, if you have two competing providers of a good or service that have to compete against each other for your business, and you as a consumer are free to choose between them, that's when you get the best product at the best price. And we want to make sure that that same type of mechanism is available, and because we know it works in every other aspect of our lives, it'll work in electricity as well.
You know, Representative, the state budget for 2016 was actually completed in June, but during the budget debate, there was actually talk about a lot of the things that you're talking about here. Reprioritizing money for public education, controlling corrections costs, controlling healthcare costs. When you're talking about energy reform, when you're talking about your plan, that jibes with all those priorities, doesn't it?
It sure does. It's a major, I mean, if Beaumont hospitals can save $3 million a year on the light bill, and of course they're running a lot more than just the lights at a hospital, but if they can save $3 million a year, if our prison system can save $3 million a year, if Detroit Public Schools alone can save $2 million a year, then obviously that's saving taxpayers money. And electricity choice is one of the significant elements that I'm going to also come up with what amounts to a package of bills that people have heard about, but all ways to save our public schools money. One would be to be able to have electricity choice. Another would be something that by repealing the prevailing wage requirement in state law, so that we don't have to pay inflated wages every time we want to build a new school building. And I'm going to be very much actively involved. In fact, by the time this is on the air, I will have a couple of days ago had a news conference with the Associated Builders and Contractors at their office in Midland to talk about encouraging people to sign the petition and to help circulate petitions to bring that issue in front of the legislature for repeal without the threat of a gubernatorial veto. I also was able to get amended the early warning legislation for financially distressed public schools, because initially it was going to apply to all schools, including those that are well managed financially. But I was able to get a threshold put into it, a threshold of at least 8% of financial reserve from the previous fiscal year, and if you had at least that, you'd be exempt from all these new reporting requirements, which local superintendents and school boards have complained to me about all of the state-imposed requirements that take away from instruction and administration, and they have to commit staff time to filling out government paperwork. So this would have, the amendment that I got with the threshold saved all the school districts in Midland County, because they had at least an 8% financial reserve, so they did not have to, and hat tip to Charlie, the superintendent at Bullock Creek, who's the one that brought it to my attention as it was happening, and I was on the phone with the superintendent, with Charlie Swedler there in Bullock Creek, as we were negotiating the threshold, and I was saying, can you get under this threshold or over it? And so we were able to get it, and then the Senate lowered it even lower to 5%, which we concurred with in the House, and what that did was get the Pinconning School District out from having to report. So the only school district in Bay and Midland counties that will have to report because they didn't have much of a financial reserve is the Bay City schools, Bay City Western, where my second son graduated and played a couple of years of football. But we were able to exempt most of the well-managed financially schools in the 98th House District. And so that's another way, and electricity choice is another way. And then I succeeded in getting the House to approve language that would have gotten the Midland Public Schools some of the at-risk money for the first time. That did not survive our negotiations with the Senate, but we're going to try that again next year. But there are number of ways of creatively structuring our finances in such a way as to save our school districts money. And one big one is going to be not only protecting Bay City Schools' ability to buy electricity from an alternative supplier, but to give Meridian Schools and Bullock Creek Schools and Midland County, Midland Public School System the same access to savings through that electricity choice as the Bay City Schools have now, and as well as give Pinconning that choice. That's just one element of a multi-pronged proposal I'm going to make to save our schools money across the board.
Representative, we're going to take a break right now, but we'll be back with Representative Gary Glenn Reports right after this. And we're back with Representative Gary Glenn Reports. Representative, we were talking about energy. Is the issue of choice the extent of the needed reforms when it comes to the energy policy question?
Good question, John. That's not the case. In fact, that's the flagship element of our proposal, but there are others that are very important to folks in Midland and Bay counties. For example, Midland Cogeneration Venture is one of the hidden treasures in this state. I've even suggested to them maybe they want to change their name to Michigan Cogeneration Venture, because they are the largest gas-fired electricity and steam producing facility in North America. And some folks even that live in Midland don't know that they're out there or exactly what they do. It's the old nuke plant is what most people know. But they have the ability to compete if they were allowed by law. They have enough electricity generating capacity to compete against consumers and DTE for new capacity if it's needed, and they just like the ability to do that, to be able to compete on an even playing field. And the current system for building new capacity in Michigan is for the self-interested utilities to self-assess the need for new capacity, self-initiate the proposal to start it, and basically have a first right of refusal to build any new energy plant. What Midland Cogeneration Venture would like to see instead is have the Public Service Commission identify the need for new capacity, new plants built to generate more electricity, and then for everybody to be able to compete. And that's the American way, to be able to compete on an equal basis. And if Consumers wins, they get the business, and if MCV wins, they get the business. We've had the news come out from MISO, which is the Mid-Continent organization that allocates energy over the entire Midwest, all the way from Michigan to Louisiana. They had, a year ago, been projecting as much as a 3,000 megawatt shortfall for Michigan. And then later they said, no, it's 1,000. Well, now they're saying it's going to be 1,000 megawatt surplus in 2016, 2017, and not looking at any type of shortage until 2020. So all these television ads that people have been seeing about the 9 coal-fired plants closing and we're going to have this energy shortfall, even that was somewhat misleading, because a shortfall doesn't mean we're not going to have enough electricity. But now they're saying we're not even going to have a shortfall until maybe 2020. And even a shortfall only means you've got all the electricity you need to keep everybody's lights on the hottest day in August when everybody's running their air conditioning, plus a 15% reserve margin. And if all 9 coal-fired plants closed, as these TV ads talk to us about, the reserve would go from 15% to 13%. That's not a crisis. And it's certainly not a justification for giving 2 corporations 100% monopoly over all electricity sales in the state of Michigan. We have the highest energy rates, electricity rates in the Midwest. We have the 11th highest in the country. The only time Michigan's electricity rates have been below the national average was the years 2000 and 2008, when we had a totally open, competitive free market. They were higher than the national average before we opened the market. And when the market was remonopolized, 90% worth in 2008, our electricity rates went back up. So when we're able to, this is not rocket science. I mean, most people, as a matter of common sense, know that if you've got a competitive environment, it forces prices lower. Ohio has a completely open market situation right now in terms of their policy, and they have lower rates than we do. And Detroit Edison, which says they can't build a plant in Michigan unless we give them 100% monopoly of the business in Michigan, they're building plants in Ohio where they have to compete for it. So anyway, for a guy who brought to the Energy Committee the bias of believing in free market principles and competition and consumer choice, let's just say that those who want to try to convince us that those principles don't apply to electricity have failed. And it was all based on the initial projection by MISO that we were going to have some kind of shortfall. Remember, that's only a reduction in the reserve margin. But now, even MISO is saying it's going to be a surplus, so that's a good thing. We're also going to reform what, according to the solar energy, is the 6th worst set of laws in the nation that Michigan has, which makes Michigan not very attractive for investment by solar energy providers. We tend to think it's because we have a lot of cloudy days, but that's not really the big reason that solar hasn't been as involved in Michigan. It's because we have a set of laws that disincentivizes solar investment. But part of our meeting, our work group included some solar array owners from Midland who were willing to come down and offer their expertise, and also representatives of the solar energy industry. And if we simply make sure that people can get reimbursed from the utilities the electricity they generate and put into the grid at the same price that they have to pay to take the exact same amount of energy out of the grid. So just even across the board, you know, if you're going to pay 13 cents to take it out of the grid and use it, but instead you generate it off solar shingles that Dow Chemical makes on your roof, and you generate the same amount of electricity and put it into the grid, seems fair to me that you ought to get paid the same price you'd have to pay for it to take it out. If we do that and also exempt solar energy equipment from property tax, as a lot of other property taxes, a lot of other property is exempt, then according to a spokesman for the solar energy industry, they said, for example, in New York, the first year they went into there, that one company alone put in $90 million worth of investment, hired several hundred people, had thousands of customers. So my objective would be to make Michigan one of the most attractive states in the country for solar energy investment. If you have a roof full of shingles on your house made by Dow Chemical that are solar, then every home becomes a prepper. Everybody becomes a prepper, everybody becomes energy independent in and of their own right. And if they happen to generate more than they use in their own household, it would go into the grid and go to their neighbor's house. It's not going to be transmitted all the way from Midland to Lansing. It would just go next door to the neighbor's house, maybe down the block. So it would not be much of a use of the existing transmission system. And also, we've got legislation that would help the situation of the owners of the Sanford Dam, which is in my district. And all it's going to do is cite it's called PURPA regulation in the federal law, and all they want is a citation in state law that their pricing structure will be determined by the PURPA regulations as to what they get paid for the electricity they generate out at Sanford Dam. And then, as I've just discussed, what we want to do to make Michigan more attractive to the solar industry. So it's going to be a comprehensive package that's going to address choice, competitive bidding, residential, commercial, and industrial users, and make us more attractive to solar energy as well, and be a comprehensive across-the-board approach to energy reform that is unlike any of the other packages that are on the table right now from the Senate, the House, or the governor.
Meanwhile, Representative, you're doing a lot of work in your district as well, including an upcoming visit by members of the Capitol's Hispanic Caucus.
That's right. I am John, I'm a member of the Hispanic Caucus, even though as far back as I can trace my roots, it's all England and France, back into the 1500s. So I'm not Hispanic, but there are only 5 Hispanic members of the legislature, Republican and Democrat both. There are 2 Republicans and 3 Democrats. So if you're going to have a caucus meeting, what the invitation was is anybody who's interested in helping lift all boats, as President Kennedy said. A rising tide lifts all boats. So if you have an interest in helping the Hispanic community by helping the economy of Michigan overall, and that's our focus, it's not on segregating into various groups based on ethnicity, but Representative Harvey Santana, Democrat from Detroit, who's the chairman of the committee, said, we want anybody to be involved who wants to help Hispanics by helping all residents of Michigan. And that will be our focus. The issues that unite us, not that divide us. And so I was very pleased to become a member of the Hispanic Caucus, and I'm going to host the Hispanic Caucus later this week. We're going to have a tour of Dow Chemical's operations, and then we're going to have meetings where Representative Santana, the chairman of the caucus, and I are going to address the Great Lakes Bay Region Hispanic Leadership Institute, which is a training organization. It's a subsidiary of the Great Lakes Bay Region Hispanic Business Association. So we're going to meet with them at Dow Chemical in the afternoon. And then just so happens that night, this is why we chose this day, it's Latino night at the Loons. So we're going to go out to Dow Diamond and enjoy the ball game and maybe have Representative Santana throw out the first pitch. I think he's going to be up to that. I understand he gets to throw out a first pitch at Tiger Stadium sometime this summer. So I think he's going to be able to handle that. And then we'll meet with smaller groups, maybe be at one of the Mexican restaurants in town and meet with members of the Hispanic community. It's only about 1% of the population in Midland County, but it's 4% of the population in Bay County. And so we're just going to try and make anybody in the 2 counties that I represent who are of Hispanic origin, ethnicity, if they wanted to come and see I've talked to Bay City, or left a voicemail for the principal at Bay City Western to see if they would like to have Harvey come speak to a student group, Hispanic or all students, because Harvey's a dynamic guy. You may know this, John, but in order to promote a bill regulating the mixed martial arts competition, right. He actually went in the cage with an 18-year-old. And he says he got his, he took a whipping, and he thought once was enough. but he wanted to just make the case that anybody can walk into one of these. There's no regulation. A pregnant woman, an old guy can walk in there, and so I think he's entirely capable of not only throwing out the first pitch at the Loons game, but I think he makes a dynamic presentation. And so we're going to do as much as we can to get exposure to the Hispanic caucus in the Midland Bay County areas here this week and through the weekend. Also during the in-summer work district time, for example, last Monday I spoke at 6 o'clock to the Garfield Township Board, at 6:30 to the Beaver Township Board, at 7 o'clock to the Auburn City Commission. I had met earlier in the day with Dr. John Finninger about health care and welfare reform. Representative Ned Canfield from the Thumb, who is a physician himself, came over, and we both met with Dr. Finninger, who writes a column for the Midland Daily News about those two issues. And I'd met earlier with some owners of the solar array out in Homer Township about electricity reform. And that same day I worked in an hour of basketball with my regular crew from Dow down at the community center. So try and stay in some relatively good shape so I can keep up with this pace. But also walked about 2 miles in the Corn Fest festival parade out at Auburn this past weekend or so ago. And so we've got a lot of we've got the Pinconning Pickle Festival or Linwood Pickle Festival coming up soon. So it's a time for festivals and getting out and also plan to be going door to door. Just making sure people know how to get in touch with me. It has nothing to do with the campaign. Just going to hand them contact information so that they know that if they've got an issue with state government they need help with, they know how to get in touch with me.
We're saying if people have a question, have a comment, drop you an email, give you a call, you might even show up on their doorstep.
That's true, and especially between now and September 9th is when we restart the every 3 days every week calendar. So in addition to going to repgaryglenn.com to get all the contact information, the email, the telephone number, 1-855-GLENN-98. 98 is the 98th district that I represent, so 1-855-GLENN-98 is a toll-free number if you want to give me a call. And over the next month or so in particular, we're not coming to Lansing except 3 days in August, I believe, to be in session. So that means I'm going to be all the more accessible in the district, in Midland and Bay counties. And people who are active in public affairs know that I try to be everywhere all the time. But as I tell the township folks, I'm going to see you in rotation because we might have a dozen townships meeting on the same night. But I say I'll be here, once every 6 months or 4 months. But if you ever need me in an emergency situation, I can be there, and whether it's in rotation or not. And that's the same message I would give every constituent is if you need something on an emergency basis, certainly feel free to call.
Okay. Representative, thank you very much.
Thank you, John.
And I'm John Perry. Thank you for joining us on Representative Gary Glenn Reports.